welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 15, which is about Marcus Aurelius and Jesus. So we're going to start by passing it over to Lizelle to get us into the conversation.
Hello, world. Yes, so as I've discussed with Sarah before, we're going to turn it around a bit, start with Jesus, and then we'll end with Marcus Aurelius, as far as the quotes that we are reading are concerned. So I've got two versions, two copies of the Bible with me, the King James version and then the Greek text. So I'll start with the Greek text, since John says it in Greek, and then I'll go to the English. En arge en o logos. In the beginning was the word. Kai o logos en pros ton theon. And the logos was with God. Kai theos en o logos. Directly, and God was the word. Though the translation says, and the word was God. So, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of the man. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. And now I'm going to continue a bit. No pun intended with this name. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, and all through him, that all through him might believe. He was not the light, but was sent to bear witness of the light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him. So back to the Logos. And the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God. We see agape there being anticipated. To become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And then to illustrate the how Christ came to reclaim the actual tradition by bringing back the words of the prophets. I'm reading from Luke 4. And so he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Then he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Thus far, our reading of the sacred text.
It's funny because I was watching that episode of After Socrates, I believe, with John and Christopher talking about looking through the eyes of Socrates to find Jesus. And I thought that was what was coming up for me while you were reading. And you were, was that John the Baptist that they're talking about in that? Okay,
yes.
so
It's
John
not John
Baptist,
Vervaeke, it's John the
right?
Baptist.
Yeah. Right. So that was, John the Baptist as the seer of the miracles of Christ, and that being the Kierkegaard, I think, was attempting to look through the eyes of Socrates. That's what I think they're arguing in that conversation, is that Kierkegaard's attempting to look through the eyes of Socrates to see Jesus. So that's interesting. And like really fitting for what we're moving into now, because of course, as he always does, John kind of summarizes the last episode. And so for this one, it was kind of like a culminating message of, well, Alexander the Great kind of inflicting cultural anxiety and domicide on all of these new Greek people that are just Greek by being conquered. And as long as they pay their taxes, they're fine to still do whatever they want. But there's like this existential crisis that's coming up for them with domicide. And so this, he says, kind of changes the cultivation of wisdom in response to a new meaning crisis, is for that wisdom to be now therapeutic. So in order to do that, well, the philosopher comes somewhat of a physician of the soul to cure that anxiety. And there's kind of three different schools of thought that we discussed, which was the Epicureans, the Cynics, and then the Stoics we started to briefly talk about, and we'll move further into them in this discussion.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a summary. So with the Stoics, so we're moving into this concept of Brosach. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Prosace, I will not be able to pronounce it any better.
Right.
Prosace. I think he says Prosace.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I can't.
It was one of those where I was like, yeah, I got it, and then I didn't. So like the nine dot problem, where I was like, that makes sense, but then you go to do it. It actually isn't as easy as you thought. So
Plus,
we'll probably be
if I look at these letters, the Greek is probably pronounced a little differently.
Yeah.
Because the CH is usually a chi in Greek. So I should have looked at the Greek for these words, but I can't figure it out quickly. So
whatever it is, it means pay attention. So
yes.
So that's the main point, paying attention. And so for the Stoics, more attention to the process as opposed to the product of them doing this practice of embodying Socrates. So they need to be more attentive to the actual process of what Socrates was doing as opposed to the product that came about. Am I wrong?
I think you're like revealing the big one a little bit early.
Okay, sorry.
The internalizing.
Sorry.
So the pay attention, what John talks about is pay attention to how you pay attention, and indeed the process of because that's part when he speaks the start of the introduction, that the Stoics identified that it's not the product of what you love or what you attach to, it's the process that is you should pay attention to. So and how to fix it then is to pay attention to what Socrates did. So, but you're already at the solution.
Well, let's slow down a little.
Let's slow down a little.
Speed limit. So there's this thing that he's talking about, this co-identification process of linking an event with meaning that we do. So he's kind of trying to provide us with this distinction that an event is not identical to its meaning, even though we do fuse them together usually.
Yes. And then when you get to the prochiron, he goes into detail because then that the prochiron is the practices for the solution. So then he goes into detail of what we can do about it. He also talks about this in After Socrates, episode 11. And in there, he mentions value and fact. In our current way of speaking, we often speak of value and fact as meaning then being value and event being the fact, and separating those two. Because he says, like, we unconsciously put them together. We frame events unconsciously. So something happens and we automatically give it meaning because we're meaning-making creatures. That's who we are. That's how we live. That's how we find life meaningful. And so then in our minds, the two go together. They're fused. They belong to each other. But that's not necessarily the case. So we have to pull them apart and learn how to look at the event and the meaning that we assign to it differently. It's not bad that we assign meaning to events. That's what makes life meaningful. That's what, because he uses like, I'm now also jumping. We're gonna jump all over the place today. he talks about Marcus Aurelius talking about sex just being friction of skin and then some sticky fluid spurting out. But it would be really sad if that was all that making love was to us. So it's good that we give meaning to events, but we shouldn't confuse the fact that we shouldn't think that the two go together spontaneously.
Yeah.
Automatically.
Yeah, it's adaptable to an extent. Because I'm thinking of the example of humans thinking that porcupines can shoot their quills out at you. Well, maybe that's not true, but staying the hell away from a porcupine is probably to your advantage. So, yeah. But the important thing to consider is the fact that we can't alter the event. We don't have as much control as we think we do. He says, stop pretending things are in your control. We're confused. And he's like emphasizing confused because we've fused meaning to the event that may not be appropriate.
And then he refers to Epictetus, one of the first Stoics, actually. Or he's an early Stoic. He still was Greek, one of the Greeks. And he quotes him saying, know what is in your control and what is not in your control. So it's that wisdom, that prayer, that serenity prayer. John also refers to it in After Socrates. This, teach me what is in what I can change, and help me to change it, and what I can't change, help me to accept it. That type of prayer. So and the events very seldom are in our control.
Yeah.
But the meaning always, or most of the time, is in our control. And that's what we need to see and get if we want to not be confused and feel terrible, because that if you that's what he says. If you think if you see them as being together, as being, you can't separate the two, then you don't really have any control over how you feel and how you go about in life. Like, everything just happens to you, and the meaning comes with that. So you need to be able to separate that if you want to survive emotionally, I guess.
Yeah, co-create the meaning so that you're not trying to fulfill it with things that have meaning from other people. Like, that's meaningful for me to have a Ferrari because other people find it meaningful, but it's not actually fulfilling anything for me. So instead, of course, finding meaning from the being mode. And because I mean, it's not, like, it doesn't come out well. It's just like we don't have the language to really say what I'm trying to say, but it's just like being, it's one of those Wu Wei kind of things where it's like the farmer who breaks his leg and somebody comes to him, oh, isn't it so awful that you broke your leg? And he's like, we'll see. And just continues to, like, Well, okay, well, now he doesn't have to go to war. That's being drafted, the next day or whatever it is. And so it actually works to his advantage, whatever disadvantage maybe he has one day. Or an advantage one day might be a disadvantage one day. So
because then someone comes to him and say, "Oh, how lucky you are that you can't go to war." And then again he says, "We'll see." And then something else happens, and I
it's
can't
his
remember
son
the
that
whole
has to
story.
go, on his
Yeah,
behalf. And now like, oh no, it's not great, is it? And it's
yeah.
like, oh, whatever. So the whole it just continues that
But not whatever. Be careful with
Yeah.
your choice of words, because whatever is exactly not the attitude that we want.
Yeah.
It's not because that's nihilistic. It feels very to say, oh, whatever. But we'll see is very different. It's like allowing fate to unfold, and that's very stoic. So
It's to bring back the Arabic word inshallah, which is
yeah,
like if God wills it,
exactly,
which
exactly.
it's like kind of comical how they use it, but they mean it as like probably not. but the whole point is like if God lets it happen, then it will happen. So
Diu valente is the Latin equivalent, if God wills.
Yeah. So that is about the Stoics getting us to realize Fromm's having and being modes is to recognize that we can't alter the event. All we can control is the meaning that we give to the event.
Yeah, so it's this book. He doesn't go into detail again because we already did go in detail of this, but it's this book that is. Nice. He has a prettier copy than I. Mine is very basic. But yeah.
Yours looks political.
It does look political.
Okay, but let's pull apart that meaning and recalibrate our sense of control and identity of that book.
Yes.
It's actually just pretty.
Yes, yeah, true. Yeah. But that is also now makes me think like they say that attractive people have easier in life because people do give also in that sense meaning. They see someone that's attractive and they automatically think they're also good and efficient and hard workers and everything that's positive. Well, that's obviously not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
But looking at an unpretty book and thinking, oh, my copy is not as good as John's. So the note, what's inside is exactly the same. Oh, it smells good. It's a very old book. Oh, it smells so good.
There's a lot of
sorry.
I
just had a moment that was not supposed to be.
I'm gonna let it linger.
Oh, my heart's racing now. So now everyone knows how to turn me on. Just let me smell an old book.
Waft it in front of your face. Take her to the library.
Yeah. So I did when I was watching this, the whole idea of control, the idea of magic and ritual came up to me because
I liked how you're making that.
Because as you might know, well, I'm part of traditions that could be conceived as magical traditions, but one of the first things that I learned from John, it was during his meditating with John Vervaeke. Someone referred to something magical, and he said something like, "Magic is the antithesis of wisdom." So I've been struggling with this whole magic and what is magic and what is not magic, and why is magic the antithesis of wisdom? Quite a lot, and this really explains it very well to me, because he says the core of wisdom is to know what is in your control and what is not in your control. And the difference then between magic and ritual is exactly that. Magic is oftentimes trying to control events that are not in your control as a human being, or even a whole group of human beings. We don't have control over much, actually. He also says that actually our level of control is very, very limited. It's like I basically have control over which book I pick up, something like that, you know.
Maybe
Maybe exactly. Well, ritual, and I think later he mentions that, or maybe in After Socrates, um, um, the having mode is about control. If you remember from, so it's about having control over this cup of water, so I get to drink, and I need to manipulate objects. So manipulation and control is in the having mode, where magic happens in like traditional, if the negative side of, I also don't want to dump on
Right.
positive, like maybe there are
Understanding.
traditions that
Yeah.
do magic, but not like this then. But traditionally, at least in my, how I'm trying to make sense of it, like magic, what John means when he speaks of magic is this control mode, this having mode. While the being mode is about being, and then specifically being in relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming into the ratio religio, which is a word that he uses a lot, or a phrase, the ratio religio, the right relationship with being, with the universe. And that is what ritual does.
Yeah.
Ritual helps you to, because he also says here, what ritual does is I change inside. And because I change inside through ritual, I also inhabit a different world, a different arena. So the
Mm-hmm.
agent changes through ritual. And that we can, I don't want to say we have control over, but we can participate in
Yeah.
our own um, development, our own character building, our own cultivation of wisdom. And because we change, we come in a different agent arena relationship. He uses the example of I'm grown up, and now the arena has changed for me. I can do more things that I couldn't do as a child, that we don't allow children to do. So that is the same with ritual then.
Mm-hmm.
I change, and therefore my relationship with the arena change, and hence the arena changes. And then I also want to go even what's popping up in my mind now, somewhere in After Socrates, he also speaks of leveling up. And ritual is also a very effective way to level up, because you
Mm-hmm.
change yourself.
Yep.
You transform yourself. And once you are a higher level, you play on a higher level.
Yep.
And hence your arena again changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is how I'm still struggling with one of the first words that I heard John say ever. I'm still trying to make sense of that, and I think this helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that distinction because we were talking about before, like casting spells in because that's a thing that you do when you're practicing magic. You're casting spells to manipulate, to change things. And it was something that I struggled with because I was like, I'm interested in what's happening. I don't
Mm,
care to have any kind of power over it. I
mm,
just like being and
yeah,
existing.
yeah,
And I honestly, like my decisions are oftentimes not good for me. So it's nice to allow something else to give me the cards that I'm playing with. It's almost like poker. It's like, here's the hand you're dealt, go with
yeah.
this. So yeah, or the tarot, whatever, whatever comes through. But yeah, that's what was coming up for me, was that now that I'm practicing in rituals that are ancient practices or traditional practices, my life is changing, and it's
Mhm,
peculiar, but it's also, it makes a lot of sense to me that this coincides, and so of course I have to keep in mind that I'm attaching meaning to the events that are
yeah,
happening
yeah,
because I have been practicing ritual. you know there's this instinct, this desire to attach the meaning to it, like, oh well, it must be correlation because I'm doing this and this is happening. But just playing with that, same thing as joining an online server and being an organizer in that server. Okay, now I'm assuming this role. People have a different reflection of me to myself because of this role that I'm playing that I wouldn't have reflected to me if I
mhm,
wasn't doing the thing. If I
mhm,
was not in that group at all, well, none of those people would know me, and none of them would know that I'm an organizer.
mhm,
Or now I'm in a job, and so I'm a
mhm,
vitamin clerk. And so
mhm,
everybody in the store knows me as a vitamin clerk. And this like comes with some kind of distinction. I'm not a
mhm,
cashier. I'm not somebody that works in customer service. I'm vitamin clerk. So
mhm,
yeah, and this has like a different effect on
mhm,
me. If I was in, for instance, the cafe, maybe I'd have a lot more fun. And, maybe I wouldn't be filling so many weird questions, but there's something about people coming to me for their questions to get answered that gives me a little bit of confidence in my just everyday experiences. So yeah, whatever you do, you are what you do every day. That's what that is just saying. We are what we continue to do daily. And so if part of that is saying, a prayer over beads for 25 to 15 to some people do it like an hour and a half mantra meditation, that's who you are. And you get some kind of, I don't know, like self-recognition about that. Like, yeah, this is something I have to do. And when I check that off the schedule, like though, if nothing else, my 4 visitations with my spiritual practice every day does something to me. So
it transforms you. I think what's important here, because I heard you use the word correlation, and John often distinguishes between correlation and causal patterns. And
true. Yeah.
Your practices, your rituals has a causal effect on who you are, because it does transform you. But it does not necessarily have a causal effect on the other things that happen, but it has a correlation effect on the other things that happen. Because you are transformed, your environment responds to you differently, and you act in your environment differently. So you different actions, the actions are caused by your practices, and then your actions cause different responses to you. And so in that sense, there's a causal effect, but it's not in a magical sense, like I say the prayer and now everything is beautiful. No, you're saying prayer, so you're becoming more wise, you're becoming more loving, more kind, and more patient. And because you're acting more kind and patient, now people are responding to you differently and offering you things.
So like, it's such a small change. Like it comes down to that machinery that automatically focuses on something. That's kind of what I feel like I'm training, is whatever machinery it is that does the relevance realization. It's like getting straight to that algorithm. And so that it's not something that I'm like consciously aware of how it is that it's changing me, but it's redirecting that focus, attention, aiming, structure thing. This is what it looks like. But yeah, so like it's so discreet how this change is happening, because it's not like I'm like intentionally being nicer to people. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I think, but there is something about my attention being on, I don't know. I think I should probably just leave it there. I think it's
no, you're saying something that I feel there's great truth in this, because my mind then automatically jumps to Jesus and what John says about a radical transformation in your salience landscape, in what it's like to be you, which Jesus brought about, or what your practice is, because it sounds like you're talking about your salience landscape is changing. When what you're paying attention to, what pops out as relevant to you is changing.
Yes.
So it sounds like that's what it's so cool. Like we said it a lot, but it's so cool. Like whatever we're discussing in practicing awakening, we're going through it in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think it's all, this is kind of what our conversations have turned into, as us commentary. The commentary has become a journal entry into, we can like review this and it's
like trying to figure out what the fuck is happening to me. Oh, this is what's happening to me.
Yeah, exactly. And perhaps if somebody does go through and intentionally through the series like this, which people do and have done, and maybe will continue to do, but the idea that this is going to be probably something you feel too, and maybe just presencing that and making that, validating that, because it does feel like a lot of moments of just synchronicity, aporia, and so instead of feeling lost because of that, maybe this helps to like alleviate that with humor a little.
Yeah. I do very highly recommend that. This is the way actually to go through the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series.
Yeah.
Discussing it with someone, with a
Hmm.
philosophical friend.
Hmm.
It's just so much richer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, he's talking about prochiron that whole time. We were talking about prochiron of remembering like sati, and
Mhm.
you had a different definition too of what prochiron is. I think modal.
Well, I wrote down what he said, remembering in a modal existential sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that again, Fromm's modal modes of being, modes of existence, having the having mode or the being mode. So it's because according to John, sati is also remembering the being mode. According to John, he always says that. Although I do disagree a bit with him about exactly what sati or remembering means, but
Yeah.
he's the expert. So um, remembering the being mode sounds good.
Yeah. And so also engaging in moment to moment practices,
Mm-hmm.
something he mentioned, which is
Yeah.
something that Marcus Aurelius did.
Yes. So prosace is the paying attention to attention and seeing this, and then prochiron is the practices that you engage in to remember your
Okay.
being mode or the modal existential sense. Remembering
Okay.
in the modal existential sense.
I see what you did there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the thing about Marcus Aurelius is that he was an emperor of Rome, so he had fame and power. It's kind of like Siddhartha in the palace, but he really emphasized that it's possible to be happy even in the palace. And John says here to not shirk his moral responsibilities. So he's journaling to himself. He's also journaling to himself in Greek, where the language most people are speaking, of course, because he's in Rome, is Latin. So, but he's journaling to himself in his meditations in Greek. That's pretty much all I have on him.
So I have an English translation of his book. I've got the same book here that John shows. So at least here I'm not jealous of this beautiful. Doesn't smell as good. It's not as old.
There's trade-offs.
No, this was my ex and he smokes. So it
Ah,
smells a little bit
a little
like
smoky.
yeah. So what I mentioned to you, when John says, yeah, he is very much aware of his responsibilities. Like he writes constantly. He writes about how we are made for each other. How, and I think that's just beautiful. Like, because yeah, if John is very against finding inherent meaning in life, he's about uh, meaning of life, meaning of life. He's about creating meaning in life.
Okay.
But when I was studying theology, one of the big questions, of course, is what is the meaning of life, not in life?
Mm-hmm.
And then the answer is to worship God. But according to him, the meaning of life is to serve your fellow human beings, type of thing. So and that's why he doesn't abdicate his role as emperor, because
Yeah.
that's what fate brought upon him, and he has to. That whole amor fati thing is very
Yeah.
stoic. Embrace your fate.
Yeah. Even if it comes with the responsibility of you're the emperor.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah,
you could take that a very selfish way. And
yeah,
cool, I'm emperor. I'm God, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I am special.
yeah. Which
But
his son did, Commodus, in Gladiator. And I read somewhere he was even worse in real life than he was in Gladiator, Marcus, which also begs a few questions of Marcus Aurelius for
yeah.
raising a son like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe he accepted his own fate, but didn't think of it in terms of a lineage.
Yeah. So about this book, maybe interesting to mention is I did read it in one go now because it was on my to read list for this episode. I would not recommend doing that. I would totally, because it is meditations that he writes to himself. What I would actually recommend is, because we're both journalists, we met at the Stoas Collective Journaling, and would he has like 12 books, and then each book has different sections, like 1, 2, 3. So I would recommend reading one section a day, even, and then meditating on that, journaling about that. That would be, I think, the best way to read Marcus Aurelius' meditations, to meditate on the meditations, and then small bits at a time, because it jumps all over the place. It's not necessarily that there's a line of, probably a through line, because there's a through line in everything, but you have to really see deeply to see the through line.
Right. That one's deeply embedded.
No, yeah. So John mentions a couple of practices, and one of the practices, objective seeing. That's this, like looking at sex, or Marcus Aurelius starts that whole paragraph thingy, mentioning how when you eat a delicious steak, it's actually like grilled dead muscle from an animal type of thing. It's not as awesome as you might think, but so seeing objectively, seeing things for really almost the disgusting bare facts, like to help you separate the meaning from the event. We give having sex sometimes, if we're in the being mode, we give them the meaning of making love, but the physical event is just
Desire fulfilled.
lots of sticky fluid.
I came, I saw.
Well,
sorry,
I
wrong
conquered.
one.
Yeah, I conquered. I saw, and then I came.
Yeah, exactly.
The other way around.
So that is objective seeing. And then I have written down all the roles I'm assigning or something I must be aware of. Yeah, so I guess just like having objective awareness of how strange things are, how literal we can see things. I don't know, it like really takes me to this, how science kind of ruins everything for me. I love science, but it like taking that really sterile approach of science makes things just not as enticing.
Yeah, but that's exactly the idea, I think, to unenchant yourself and to look at things. I mean, ultimately, I think you should re-enchant yourself also, because you don't want this type of relationship with reality, this sterile relationship. But you have to remember that this is reality, and this is the meaning that I'm assigning to it. And my enchantment lies in the meaning that I'm co-creating with the people I participate with, and with the other agents, and with the arena. That's where the enchantment lies. But in itself, it's bare, sterile facts. Although even saying that, this might also be this might still be also a lesson that I still need to learn. Yeah.
Well, okay, because let's just like describe some of the ways that this can go wrong. For instance, with romantic comedies.
Yes.
Narrative.
Yes, if we don't,
Yeah.
Because we think the narrative meaning we assign is in line with the way the world is unfolding. That is what romantic comedies enhances our thinking of life. Like, this is meant to be, and so I have two favorite rom-coms. Well, the other one is kind of, well, it ends happy, so it's a comedy.
Okay.
But if I want to cry, I watch it, because I cry the whole, like What Dreams May Come. I don't know if you've seen it. Oh, you have to see it. It's so the guy literally goes to hell for his wife, and it's very based on Dante, the hell, the way it looks and everything. There's even Abandon all hope, all ye who enters here is written. So, and they're soulmates. And so he found, but anyway, but the other one, the other romantic comedy that I've mentioned a couple of times is Only You, with Robert Downey Jr. and Melissa, the one who plays Aunt May in Spider-Man. It's beautiful. And it's where they're grown up starts with Destino, Destinari, and then destiny, and how if you just follow your path, your path will lead you back to your true love, and you will be reunited and you will be one again.
Yeah.
that is basically the idea of
Yeah.
all rom-coms.
Yeah.
Like, just follow your path and the unfolding of fate, and it will bring you back to your other half, the one you
heaven? Isn't that heaven though? I mean, that feels to me like that's the exact same. I mean, okay, maybe not the exact same, but the idea that we have now hallmarked love. So now the concept of what it is to truly achieve that eternity in heaven is to find that soulmate, because that's all that heaven could possibly be.
That's the only happily ever after we know, is finding love. And so, romantic love, never mind, because what we have is true love, I'm sure, but we wouldn't say that is like that's not, you don't see movies about people meeting awesome friends, right? It's oh, that's true, that's the new heaven what we aspire to.
It makes a lot of sense with also considering the path that we think we're intended to be on, which is to be in a partnership and to have the picket fence and the perfect home. And when I don't necessarily reject that storyline, but it's not important to me as it was. And so now that there's this like new storyline that's more important to me, which is what we're going to get into even further, which is having the philosophical friends. But yeah, that's that rom-com seems even less of how it works, because he's like, that's not how it works. The universe doesn't care. So yeah, I'm actually like able to find a lot of humor. I will say that I use the montage scene of rom-coms where the girl just gets rejected and like nothing's working out for her. She's like falling downstairs. I use that image to my advantage a lot, because I'm always like, this is that part of the movie where like everybody still loves the character, but she's getting shitted on so bad, and you're just like, why, God, why does this keep happening to her? Or film writers, whoever is in charge of it, so the director. So yeah, but it's like this kind of hilarious relationship that the character has with the universe, as opposed to it being something fated. I don't know. It doesn't feel like that.
My view, because as I said, when I read his words, it doesn't care about my happiness, about the meaning I am making. And I'm like, oh, I wrote my master thesis on Providentia Dei, which is the providence, which is God actively taking part in the unfolding of history, which we will get back to when we get to Jesus. And so it's something that's very dear to me, actually, this whole idea of, so the way I see it is that I call the one, or the, I don't know how to refer to, I often call her the author, but I see her as an author that allows for, or the playwright, I should rather say, because we're all actors. And I see it as a playwright who allows for improvisation. Like she has this plan, which we are playing out, but she allows us to participate in the production
Mhm.
of this play that is
Yeah.
being performed. That's how I see it. And I do see her sometimes when I'm so inclined because of, I don't know, hormones or sunny skies. Um, I do see that it is a benign. Is benign the right word?
I think so.
It's good world.
Benefic,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, a good world that yeah.
That there's some sort
I
of,
don't know.
yeah, like beneficence. I don't know if that's a word, but
Good, but
good.
that's platonic. Seeing that there's good at the core of everything.
Yeah.
The good is the ultimate. That
Yeah.
and
Well, I feel like it's when that's what you're looking for. And if you're,
yeah.
you know, obviously if you're looking for the bad, and I don't think people intentionally or knowingly look for the bad, but they're just programmed to find the bad more
Mhm.
frequently than they are to find the good. So,
But yeah, we were both lucky in where we were born, for instance, and things like that, which if we were born a different time and place, maybe we would also not necessarily see the good
yeah.
in
Yeah.
providence. It's complicated, these
It's
things.
very complicated. Yeah. It's
But
totally
John says we shouldn't think that it was predestined, not in
right.
an intentional way. He calls it a magical plan, fate, because then he gets to fate.
Fate and
And
fatality. Yeah. And how that
yes,
word is like fatality is linked with death because death is where the events and meanings become unglued from one another. So we associate fatality with death because that's the moment when that happens.
the ultimate moment when that happens,
Yeah.
because it also happens when you have this great picture of you and this guy that you're destined for each other, and then he breaks up with you. That's also a moment of, oh, my meaning and reality is not quite aligned with each other.
Yeah.
So that happens as well. That's little deaths that we die
Mm-hmm.
quite frequently. But the ultimate ungluing is death.
Yeah.
But see, then I just one more thing about romantic comedies. Because I'm not the Stoics do believe in fate and the natural unfolding of everything, of like
Mm-hmm.
things just happen because they were programmed. Like we were talked, I think before recording, I'm not sure how things are fated in certain ways, and as in it was part of their evolution, it was made in put into us, and so they do believe in. That's why Marcus Aurelius says, yeah, it was his fate to be, because that's how destiny unfolded. But the way I then see it, because I am a hopeless romantic. And I do think that there are certain partners that will help us to become the best persons that we could be. And because of this natural unfolding of life, they will naturally also cross our paths. And what happens then, I don't know.
Right.
I've fucked up in that regard. So yeah, we'll see.
Well, yes. Fortunately, we all die. So no matter how big we fuck up.
Fortunately, we all die. That is probably the
So,
most pessimistic sentence I've ever heard.
even if we fuck up.
Yeah. So be
All
it.
right. Yes. Because we can, um, dissociate the meaning from the event. So they're
Yes,
not identical.
yes, yeah.
So the view from above is when we situate the event within space and time. That's not a quote. That's what I said. So
Yeah.
it's actually the agent arena being altered. So we become, for instance, more liable to attain long-term goals, more flexible, able to participate in rational reflection. It gives us discernment to pull apart meaning from the event when we take this view from
Mhm.
above.
Mhm. Yes. John has a very powerful meditation. He teaches it in, so Awakening, after Socrates, episode 11 is all about the Stoics. And then he also teaches this view from above meditation. He actually guides us through the meditation. And it is very powerful way of disassociating with your me self, your little me, the little Lazal who's so worried about, you know, fucking
Well,
up.
yeah, right. Small that seem really big. But
Yeah,
yeah, so like,
exactly.
so it would be, let's think about this from the perspective of Lizelle in Amsterdam or whatever,
Mhm,
wherever,
mhm, mhm.
and then zooming out even further, like
Yeah,
on the planetary perspective. This is why
yeah,
astrology is so helpful for me,
yeah, yeah,
because yeah, I'm zooming out to like way further.
yeah,
And so I've even said, for example, one time when I got a ticket, I was like, if this is the
yeah,
worst thing that can happen during this time period, I'll take it. So
yeah,
yeah, it just completely
yeah,
shifts the perspective. Even
yeah,
when I was doing the vision quest and the chief told us that when they were cooking, they'd be cooking on our behalf, they would be eating for us, completely changed everything. Because when I smelled
mm,
food later and I was starving, literally, I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry
yeah,
at them. I wasn't like, hey, why are they eating? I was like, thank you. And
yeah,
so that's a really weird trick,
yeah, yeah.
that we can do, that we can, yeah, that our mind has that kind of power.
Yes, to see ourselves as part of the whole. And the quote from Marcus Aurelius that I want to read actually comes back to that. So that's pretty cool.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So there's like a perspective change. He says, move off trying to change the event and have a cognitive reframing of the meaning itself.
Mm.
And so one of the ways to do that is by embodying Socrates.
Yeah. Because
Having people.
remember, you have no control over the event. You have control over the meaning you
Mm,
assign to it.
mm-hmm.
That's the big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Internalizing the sage or Socrates specifically.
Yeah. And so people stop and be Socratic with themselves.
Do with yourself what Socrates has done to you.
And so, I mean, this goes back to like this therapeutic
Mm-hmm,
reason for cultivating wisdom. And so he even goes back to mention that therapists do this very thing.
mm-hmm,
This is like the
mm-hmm,
basis of therapeutic psychology right now, which is really having somebody kind of back away from hyperboles, like everything's a failure, and then having them reflect on, really though, because you're here, like you made it here, so not everything is a failure. And so having those kinds of questions towards oneself.
And what Socrates does, he gets you to question everything. Because the fact is that most of us are way ahead of our understanding. That I very much experience myself, that I'm way ahead of my
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's I think my biggest beef with recording things,
Mm,
because people forget if you say something and
yep.
11 months later they've forgotten. But if it's recorded,
Yeah.
they can go
Evidence.
back, and I very proudly and affirmed something, and then 11 months later I'm like, oh no, I completely misunderstood that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and that all comes part to the agent arena relationship too. I'm a different agent every single day. And even further into my future, obviously, my
yeah,
understanding of things changes in a way that, yeah,
yeah,
I no longer interact
yeah,
with it in the same kind of way.
yeah, yeah.
So it's,
Someone said, if you don't look back at your past self and grinch a little bit, it might even be might be that John actually quoted this as well. Not doing it right. You're not
yeah,
growing, you're not transforming. So
right.
you have to be able to look back at your past self and think, ugh.
Yeah.
Otherwise, so it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to discern our identity and perspective, to properly identify them so that we can alter our sense of identity. So,
Transform your capacity for interacting with the world. I said.
Mm.
Transform your sense of identity. And then discernment, he talks about, and how important that is to wisdom. And I had to think of our judgment
Yeah.
talk, which we had that talk shortly after I read one of the chapters in this book, which is about judgment and discernment. That's why that was in my mind, the whole idea of judging. Yeah. Because that is what you're doing here. You're judging the event differently. You're discerning what is really going on here.
Yeah.
Not what meaning have I automatically assigned to this, but what is really going on here.
Yeah.
That's also what you're trying to.
Yeah. And so you literally have to get outside of yourself to even see what meaning you're assigning. Because otherwise it just falls into the narrative. The characters, obeying the plot. And there's no,
That's a very good way to say that, to get out of yourself, because all these practices is in a certain way that, like the view from above is getting out of yourself. The journaling that he did, the writing to himself, is getting out of yourself, like taking on, as if you are writing to a third person, writing to yourself. And this practice of internalizing the sage is also kind of getting out of yourself, because you're getting someone else in you. Like,
He takes this kind of, I may be jumping around with this part, but what I have written down is, I get great at everything. And so he's saying, and the reason I wrote that down is he goes into this little bit about like a thought experiment of, okay, let's say that you are given the opportunity to be immortal.
I just want to say you should quote John on just saying that, because that will be like when you quote someone that you don't like, to say, look how how self-assured he is. Like, I'm getting great at everything.
Yeah, I just get really good at stuff. I don't know. He doesn't indicate how long it would take to get good at everything. But you imagine, like, if I just have like centuries to be getting better and better and better and better, of course you're going to get better at things. And that would be the only thing that you could achieve for longer periods of time. And it says nothing about the fullness of that life.
Yes. The Good Place. Have you seen The Good Place? It's on Netflix.
Have. Yeah, that's a good one.
And Tahani does that in the end. She learns how to do a lot of things skillfully. So it's her, that's her eternity. That sounds like a pretty good eternity for me as well.
If I had to live forever into eternity, I would want to get good at a lot of things. There's a lot of things I want to get good at too, but I don't want this to go on forever, because it's Groundhog Day. It's like every day you wake up and you try to be the best that you can be, and that gets harder and harder as parts of my body fall apart and things no longer function like they used to, and I no longer function like I used to, and it's just this constant process of Agent Arena, reestablishing. And so it's kind of exhausting for me, if I'm being honest.
I have a kind of different view, because I don't if I get the opportunity to be immortal, I know that it won't be me who's immortal, because I keep changing. Like, the me I'll be in 10 years is not the same me as I'm now.
Right.
So the me that I will be in 100 years, I have no idea who she's going to be, but it won't be me.
Right.
So I see if I were given immortality, it won't be me who's immortal.
Yeah.
Anyways, so bring it on. Give me that bell. But make my aches go away. I don't want the aging that goes with it.
Right.
What I have written is, you don't want length of life, but you want fullness. A depth of being. And my personal writing, I wrote something parallel to something that Christopher wrote, and I called it love as the eternal present moment. So for me, that is the eternal, I'm still playing with the words, the eternal moment or the eternal present moment, or I don't know. But those moments, that's where that he draws the line. That's what life is all about. That going really deep into being and being present. And there's something eternal about those moments. That's why I call it the eternal moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. There's one of the gene key contemplations that's coming up for me with Richard Rudd talking about when the Olympics was in London, I guess. And he was like, it was such a different feeling. This was one of those spots in time that
yes.
because everybody was so alive on the subway and saying, hey, good morning to each other. And he's like, this is not normal for our buses for people to be that alive. But yeah, that just like pride was coming through and grace was coming through. And they were really expressing joy for the present moment.
Yeah. Which almost sounds like a kairos.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that having versus being, he just like kind of sums up here as the having is that fame and fortune, where being is self-transcendence and fullness of the being. Coming to complete fullness based on the quality, and that's something that's achievable in every moment. Like you were saying, the eternal moment.
So it is not necessarily present in every moment. Let's face it, life is mostly not filled with eternal moments.
Mm-hmm. Fortunately, in some cases too.
Yes. Otherwise, it would be a little bit overwhelming.
It reminds me of too the story of Ganymede and Zeus, and that relationship of Zeus, and just like the gods in general, being envious of this mortal because he does have only that short amount of time for things to happen, and that fact that he can die, they're just like, wow, that's so interesting. And we're the opposite about the gods. It's like eternity, that's amazing. So
well, we should distinguish. John does it also often between eternity, eternal, and unending, because the eternal has nothing to do with time. It's not time continuing. It's and immortality is more like your time continues. While eternal is a different element. It's for me. It's that place beyond space time.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the eternal. So they're immortal, they're not necessarily eternal. Yeah. Well, we can be, or we can experience eternity and be eternal for certain moments even.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, this idea of an ontological identity rather than a historical identity goes really nicely with that too. Exercising control over the meaning making.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then having that ontological rather than historical identity.
Then he gets to Pierre Hadot.
Hello.
He also recommends these books in Awakening. Oh, this is Awakening. After Socrates. So it's nice to combine the two for a change. Yeah. My reading list.
All over the place, but still like all philosophy somehow.
Yes. And yeah.
So in those two, is this kind of like talking about how we don't have to look east for those self-transcending psychotechnologies? That actually in the West there are some examples of it as well.
Yeah. And then he goes really through how the Western tradition had these self-transformative psychotechnologies. And
well, I'm finding it really interesting to take this Catholic exploration because I didn't realize how much practice there was involved in it. Because like I told you, like I got my first communion and then we went to Kuwait, and what I saw was their ritual. And I was like, that's a lot of ritual. And it's so interesting to me that it's the very thing that made me question my own faith, was the fact that I wasn't practicing it. I was like, I was seeing people practice something and seeing how devout that made them. And so now with my own practice, it's just interesting to be participating in something. My mom would tell me, she's like, I did my meditations. I'm like, sure, mom, whatever. Not realizing that she does the meditations every time she does the rosary. And it's just part of the practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really interesting to rediscover how something that I thought was so fascinating with, Islam, but also my instructor for astrology for the longest time was a Bhakti monk who did his mantra meditation every day for 90 minutes and started every one of our classes with his mantra too. So seeing that, it's like a practice, it's a devotion, it's an offering to whatever that separate entity is. So yeah, that was something that, I don't know, that already having that psychotechnology with my Catholicism, I could be utilizing that, but just never gave it any credit because I'm like, oh, it's something I already know, not realizing I didn't know it.
Yeah, the off. You're getting to know it like the biblical sense. Knowing by participating, knowing by loving.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Yeah, and it's so much more true if you know by participation than only knowing by learning propositions from a book.
Yeah, and finally, like I had that moment where I was like, I didn't believe astrology was a thing. Like I thought, oh, those silly ancients. And I didn't think of it as anything that could have any value to me until I practiced it. And then I realized how many people came after me about it not being real, but people that had never done any research into it beyond their sun sign horoscope. So it repeated something from my supplement world where people used to come to me, nothing in here is approved by the FDA. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Think of the things that they do approve. So there's like always this kind of flipping it on people of actually, have you gone any deeper into trying to learn this? Because what you'll find is it's actually probably a lot more, at least something that makes patterns accessible to you. If it's not true patterns, you're at least able to pick up on patterns based on, being able to interact with things to that extent that you have that.
And you, like you just mentioned earlier, you're basically every day practicing the view from above when you look at the stars.
Yeah.
You're getting yourself in the celestial realm instead of little Sarah realm.
Yeah.
So
the quest for meaning, wisdom, and a response to existential anxiety is that rediscovery through, I guess, the Western traditions of Stoicism, Platonism. But he was really saying like it would be especially important to fuse them with cognitive science to salvage the practices and the wisdom and meaning making within our scientific worldview.
Which is what John is all about.
Which is what he's all about. And I like it.
John Vervaeke, not John the Baptist.
Right. I don't think John the Baptist was telling anybody to question anything. In fact, he was questioning people. Yeah, it's important for me because that's a part of my life. And this is part of fate. This is part of that understanding of my destiny, my fate, is that I learned science too. And, but I'm also like the child of someone that's very devout about their Catholicism. So it's just like a bunch of different things that I have to be the one that brings them together. Otherwise, there's no vessel within which they can come together. And so this is something that's nice about John when linking cognitive science with the Eastern traditions that he's already done, but now also bringing in, through this episode and a couple of others, understanding how the Western tradition moves into it too.
Yeah.
So
he's going really deep in New Platonism and how to, I almost want to say justify it scientifically. Yeah. He gave a talk at Greg's conference. It was so amazing. It was next level. And it's also called Leveling Up. He shared it on his, but I will have to watch it a couple of times before I totally get it. It's, when he was giving that talk, I was thinking, the poor man, like, it feels when I was listening to him speaking there, and I sometimes have it when he's just speaking to Chris as well, it feels like he's constantly having to dumb himself down so that people can understand him. And he started that talk by saying, okay, this is going to be a little bit difficult. And then he spoke and it was like, yeah, this man is capable of communicating on this level. No wonder he loves Chris so much, and the two love each other so much. It's yeah, he's quite extraordinary. It's yeah. So
yeah,
and because I mean, his normal talks is challenging to most people. But still, when I saw that, I was like, oh, he's constantly dumbing himself down, actually. Already.
Yeah. I mean, and becoming the expert in something, it's so important to be able to refresh what is primary, basic, elementary information.
Yeah.
So that you can continue to cycle that in to the higher level discussion, and you're always able to engage people that have watched the episode 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, and then somebody that has just watched it for the first time, for them to be able to have a conversation together. There's certain through lines that have to be established in order for that to be a conversation that can be had. And it's difficult because I was actually talking with the gardener, the art organizer of the community garden, and she was talking to me about my Instagram posts about astrology. She was like, I have to tell you that, like, I love the pictures that you put up, but you start out talking about something and it takes me so long to process and digest it. So she was basically telling me like it was way too high level. She was like, I don't know who your audience is, who you're trying to make your audience, if it's expert or if it's people that don't know it at all. And I was like, that's good feedback, because I would like for it to be something where I'm incorporating the elementary knowledge as we go along. And so I think that's why, he does the vocabulary and all the things.
It's I understand now why I decided to commit myself to him as a study, because you have to study. It's not just listening, you have to really study. But because you probably do speak, because most people don't have, like you mentioned, don't have knowledge of astrology on the level that you have it. Most people know their sun signs. So actually last time I said he was born in the Hellenistic age. And I think in this book I read that I was wrong, talking about looking back in your past self and seeing errors. But I wasn't that far wrong. So I think it was this book, the Hellenistic age ended with Cleopatra. So it was 30 BC. So it's pretty close. Like 30 years in the big picture is not that bad. So it wasn't then anymore the Hellenistic era, it was the imperial age that he was born into. Yeah. And in Israel, which then was like under the Roman occupant, how do you say that?
Right. Roman Empire had conquered them.
Yeah. But the Roman Empire had conquered the Greeks, and so they were kind of part of it. All kind of flew in the then there's a saying Horrocks, I think, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, Horatius, a poet, a Roman poet, wrote something about the conquered has conquered the conqueror, meaning that the Greeks with their beautiful philosophy and beautiful culture has captured the hearts of the Romans. So the Roman Empire was very still, I mean, Roman Empire, but greatly influenced by the philosophical Hellenistic philosophy. Also Roman, I think Cicero, he wrote in Latin, but Greek thinker to a great extent. So so it was the imperial age, but there was, I mean, Jesus probably, well, it could be that he spoke Aramaic, but the New Testament was written in Koine, which is a form of Greece.
Yes, that's actually what Marcus Aurelius wrote in also.
Oh, did he? Oh, I didn't. Oh, that's cool. Then I should be.
Yeah. So all that kind of describing the environment within which Jesus of Nazareth was born. Basically, that was like the worldview was back to pre-axial.
Yes.
And there's a God man in charge.
Mm. The emperor. Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds very Star Warsy though, also, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The Empire Strikes Back.
The Empire's back.
And so, and that's important because what Jesus then does, and that's why I read him quoting the prophets, he brings back the actual age mentality that, well, John says here that the da'ath, knowing by loving, to participate in the course of history, co-creating an open future, which is kind of, maybe that's why I see the one as, because I am very deeply steeped in Judeo-Christian, why I see the one as the author, and us as co-creating. So, but especially the prophets were the ones who were the voices of the actual age, and they were telling people to take on responsibility for themselves, and that they have, it's because of your sins that you are being thrown into exile. So stop sinning, feed the hungry, take care of the orphans, take care of the widows, and you will be redeemed. So that is, Jesus is bringing that call to take responsibility. He's bringing that back, and especially then this idea that history is the unfolding of the will of God, and that there's certain moments in history where God actively intervenes in the course of history, the kairos. And then for the Christians, the kairos were embodied in Christ. John speaks of Jesus of Nazareth, and in one of his dialogues with Chris, he does say that because Christ is a term that is very low laden, there's a lot on the term. So he speaks of Jesus of Nazareth. I prefer to speak of the Christ because for me it is the symbolic significance of the Christ more than the person Jesus of Nazareth that manifests in this kairos, and is the logos. I see more the Christ, the anointed one, as the kairos, as the logos, than Jesus of Nazareth, the man. Well, John sees it differently.
Interesting. Yeah, because that kind of brings back Siddhartha and the Buddha. Like, when do you start to refer to him as the Buddha? When he becomes enlightened. Yeah, I see. And so part of me is like, well, if we're taking a biblical account of the individual through whom the logos is incarnated, then we're talking about Jesus of Nazareth. And once that but when does it happen? Because it's that conception with Christ. Or Jesus.
No, is it at the it was a big dispute between the Catholics and the Protestants, seeing that we're although I have a Catholic symbol.
So who do you vote for?
But like, is Mary the mother of God?
Right. Did she have to care for God?
Or is she the mother of the man
body?
Jesus? Because there's the two natures of Christ. Is also a very big theological thing. Like he's the tradition I was trained in is he's fully human and he's fully God. So, and then the Catholics have a prayer, or I think it's that they call Mary the Mother of God. And the Protestants were like, no, she's not the Mother of God, because she can't be. That would make her higher than him, because the mother is. So she's just the mother of the human part of him, not of the godly part of him. So, and then I think we could argue in that sense. Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking now, because when he is baptized, by John, the Spirit of God descends upon him, and only after that does he actually start his ministry.
Right.
Although there are other apocryphal, I don't know how to say this in English. All of this I only know in Afrikaans. It's that talks about Jesus as a child as well. It's where he was already expounding scripture to the learned people of his days. At the age of 12. He's the fulfillment of the prophecies, he says, and he brings that mentality, John says, of the actual age in Israel.
There's something really important here about the right timing too that he was emphasizing. Like, I think at one point he calls it the spirit of finesse, which was referencing an author, but I don't know who. But
Pascal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if there was. I mean, this has to do with the word kairos, but I didn't know if there was anything that you had.
Well, I wrote the fullness of time. So what John does, and I imagine he does it with everything, but because Christianity, to me, Christ is, like he said, a lot of people see Christ as a God, Jesus as a God. And for me, he's a God. I know him as a God. I don't know him as as a prophet, and I don't know him as a wise man. I know him as a God.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's very difficult to interpret these things the way John does. Like when he comes to the spirit of finesse, he talks about kissing someone at the right time, the right moment for it. And so that makes kairos in my hands, like feeling into the right moment. Well, for me, kairos is something external to me. I don't know how to explain it. It's it is either Christ, the man, or like I said before, we're in a kairos. So it's more me picking up, but not necessarily, I don't know, maybe I acted on it as well. And maybe that's the spirit of finesse that Pascal talks about, picking up these moments and then acting upon it.
Yeah, because what's the difficulty of understanding Christ through kairos as being right timing? Like, do you think that I don't know, like, was the decision made for him to jump on the right timing? Is that kind of the question? Or because when you say that you acted on it too.
Okay, but kairos, then let me rephrase it. And kairos is not necessarily the right time, although that's what it sounds like here. Kairos is this turning moment in time. This
paradigm shift kind of thing.
Yes. So, and Christ is the big turning moment in the history of God and man and our relationship with each other. In that sense, like, so a kairos is more a big turning than
taking the moment to act at the right time.
Turning, I now see someone going straight when the road has turned. Then you're off the path. So kairos is knowing when to turn with the course of history or something like that. That's the finesse. That's a finesse that's needed to know when to turn with the
well, it's coming up for me, like the image of archery and like sin being off the course. And so but like the finesse is like, can you shoot your arrow in a way that it like flies around or whatever. So he quotes, I think, the Bible maybe here. In the beginning was the Logos.
That's what I read.
That's what you read, because the Greek, it says in the beginning was the Logos.
It's from the Gospel of John. Next time I'll read from one of the letters of John.
Okay. So in that excerpt, then it's like a representation of God's capacity for producing kairos through logos. All others pointed to him and are summed up in him. So he says it represents it personally and historically. And this is interesting because we've moved away from Plato writing in dialogue about Socrates, and now we're moving into like a third person view of Christ, and also this ability that we're kind of developing to see through, I guess, the lens of other people to Christ, because it never seems like you're learning how to, I don't know, I'm hesitating to say it, but like to be Christ-like, like that's unattainable, because with the whole thing is like we're imperfect humans. So we can aspire to be like Christ, but there's only one way, or logos, or that turning thing happened external to me, basically. Like the kairos, the paradigm shift happened external to me. Yeah, well, then he goes into that word metanoia, which is meta, beyond, and noia, perspectival awareness. And so now, like, this isn't probably what he was saying, but for some reason I'm getting this sense that this word metanoia is why it's so difficult for me to describe what it is that Christ embodies, because it's beyond like a human perspective that one could have. Like it's a more continuously third entity perspective. So I don't know if that's what he means by metanoia, or if you have a different.
I also always understood metanoia, I don't know why, as a turning around. So indeed it changes the way you see. And it reminds me of the cave.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've just been untied. Don't know by who or what, but you've just been untied. You've just been dragged up that steep ascent of the cave. And now you're seeing for the first time the actual shapes of that of which you've only seen the shadows. There's no way that you will be able to describe what you're seeing. And that's what you're describing now.
Yeah.
It's like when you first start to see the Christ, I want to say.
Yeah.
When you first start to see reality, being, there's no way you're going to be able to describe it. While when you were tied down, Plato writes about how the prisoners are actually have these competitions to see who can explain best what we're seeing, the shadows that we're seeing, so that we're very good at explaining all of fake reality.
Oh my gosh, it makes me think of like journalists on CNN, particularly CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, like reporting the things that are actually happening, and it's like, okay, like stock market, all the blah blah blah, it's real, sure, but they're like assigning meaning, and it did seem like this competition of who can best describe what's actually going on when they're just describing things that people are doing. For the most
that's
part.
not the real deep reality. That's not the deep calling to our deep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It is. It's beautiful, I think. This realm of reality, but it is ineffable. Okay, so John makes it very dramatic. He's like, okay, so what causes this metanoia? What causes this big transformation in who you are and your state? And he said, like, it's gonna sound very blasé. It's love. So that's the answer. Love is the answer to what transforms us. But I mean, that's what we've been saying all the time. Like that's what gets you into anagoge. It's love. It's
Yeah.
whatever form of love you choose. It's only love that can move us into higher states of being,
Mm-hmm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
or lower states of being. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's another important thing to mention too, is that he says love is a mode, a way of being, and not an emotion, not a feeling. It's a it's an agent arena relationship.
That really moves me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. So, like I said, and after Socrates, John defines love as, again, and he is now much more elaborate about it. So I'm going
Nice.
to read how he.
Yeah,
It's so
cool.
beautiful. Love is an existential stance. Just that, an existential stance. That's love. The way you stand in existence is love, if you so choose it. It could be.
Mm.
It is a way of binding yourself in mutually participated uh, co-identification and reciprocal opening. I develop through you, you develop through me, and we both stay faithful to that. Not to each other, to that. We stay faithful to that mutual transformation, that mutual choice to
Mm-hmm.
be in love. It's
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah. 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 And definitely different from how we usually think about love. Because there's, okay, 3 different types of love, probably
Well,
more.
there's actually 4. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
He
Well,
doesn't
see, I
mention
was right.
self-love. Huh?
Yeah. I said, see, I was right. Just that quick. There's more.
Yeah. But wait, there's more. He doesn't mention self-love.
Okay, so self-love.
So,
Yeah, true. Very important. Um, and this is also to kind of distinguish what the type of love that Jesus offered, which was a different kind of love from Eros and Philia, which was agape. So when he says Eros, he says that we seek to be at one with other.
mm,
And so I guess, I mean, when I think about this, I think of like transcending this single self to become united with another.
mhm.
Oh, wow.
Again, that's crazy.
Again. And then with Philia, he says there's reciprocity. Then there's agape, which is what I guess we're introduced to with Christ.
Well, I've started to read Plato very like brokenly, but still because I have ways to do it in the Greek, and he actually writes about agape. So it's not that this is the first time that the word is used.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I think the first time that it's so prominent and
Yeah.
interpreted in this way.
Okay.
I'm not sure how it's first, but it's not
Embodied,
the yeah,
like
maybe
fully
indeed.
embodied.
Yes, that it becomes the core, the center of the community. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it would require participation from everyone in the community,
Mhm,
or at least, yeah,
mhm,
active members for agape to
mhm,
be something that could even exist.
mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you want to talk about a quote from our good friend Marcus Aurelius?
I don't want to talk about it, but I could read it. We could
Yeah.
talk about it as well.
Okay. I mean, we could talk for days, apparently.
When you fret at any circumstance, you have forgotten a number of things. You have forgotten that all comes about in accordance with the nature of the whole, that any wrong done lies with the other. Further, that everything which happens was always so in the past, will be the same again in the future, and is happening now across the world. That a human being has close kinship with the whole human race, not a bond of blood or seed, but a community of mind. And you have forgotten this too, that every man's mind is God and has flowed from that source, that nothing is our own property, but even our child, our body, our very soul have come from that source, that all is as thinking make it so, that each of us lives only the present moment, and the present moment is all we lose.
Yeah, that immediately brought up for me that quote. I think I tried to quote it last time. I'm not going to be able to do it again, but why waste today worrying about tomorrow? Because then all you do is waste today.
Yeah. Jesus also says something like that.
Okay.
Look at when he speaks of look at the sparrows and look at the lilies of the field. They don't worry about tomorrow. And then he goes on and says, tomorrow will bring enough worries of its own. So leave that for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just live today. Something like that.
Nice. Okay. Well, that was another long discussion about two very distinguished gentlemen. So we hope that you will join us at the Stoa after Socrates on Sundays at noon. And any other things that you would like to add here in the end?
I just really want to express my gratitude to you again, Sarah, for going through this with me. It's so deepening my understanding and my appreciation even for John, if that is possible.
Mine too. Yeah. Okay, wonderful people. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, future selves, for reviewing us. And we'll see you in the next video.